It is my privilege to introduce Basketball Hall of Famer Pat Williams and co-founder and Senior Vice President of the NBA's Orlando Magic. How many Orlando Magic fans do we have here? Let's hear it for Orlando Magic. As one of the world's top motivational speakers, Pat has addressed members of Fortune 500 companies, national trade associations, and universities in the United States and abroad. I am pleased to have him here with us today. Pat has been general manager with the NBA teams in Chicago, Atlanta, Philadelphia, including the 1983 world champions 76ers, and now the Orlando Magic, which he has helped lead to the NBA Finals in 1995 and 2009. Pat has been able to meld great leaders such as Dr. J, Moses Malone, Charles Barkley, Maurice Cheeks, Shaquille O'Neal, and Penny Hardaway into some of the most memorable championship teams. 30 of his teams have gone to the NBA playoffs, and 6 have made it to the NBA playoffs. Pat is author of 100 books, amazing, on a wide range of subjects, including sports, leadership, teamwork, and peak performance. From 1996 to 2011, he competed 58 marathons, including the Boston Marathon, 13 times. Wow, amazing. In 2011, Pat was diagnosed with blood cancer. He has since won his battle with cancer, and is in complete remission. Amen. If that wasn't enough, Pat and his wife Ruth are the parents of 19 children, including 14 adopted from 4 foreign countries. They also have 15 grandchildren and counting. Would you please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Pat Williams.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. I would add one word to Scott's little dissertation. He talked about love. He talked about vote. He talked about pray. I'm going to add another word here this morning that I want to talk to you about for a few minutes. And that word is leadership. You see, everything rises and falls on leadership. It always has, and it always will, and it will always be a topic of intense interest in this country and intense discussion and intense debate nonstop. The real question this morning is, with this debate about leadership and all the different views, what is a great leader meant to look like? What are the qualities of an outstanding leader? Well, as far as I'm concerned, there was no greater leader than Jesus. When you really study his life from many different angles, one of the angles you can really hone in on is Jesus, the leader. I have discovered in my study of Jesus as a leader that there's 7 ingredients, 7 qualities that Jesus possessed as a leader. And we can all benefit from that because we're all in the leadership business. Let me do a little test. How many husbands are here today? Well, you're certainly in the leadership business. How about wives? Do we have some wives here today? Yeah, you're all in the leadership business. Do we have any grandparents? Yeah, we're deeply into the leadership business, just like you are. Do we have any people who have a leadership position in their work, their business? Yeah, you're certainly part of the leadership team. How about youth sports? Anybody involved in youth sports? Yeah, that's certainly a leadership deal. And if you do nothing but lead yourself, you're all in the leadership business. So welcome to the leadership gathering. And the 7 qualities that Jesus possesses that I think we can all take and apply to our leadership world. I'm ready to get started if you are. Do you have some paper? I mean, that might not be a bad idea. Do you have a writing instrument? Do you have a pen? Perhaps a pencil? Lipstick or mascara, ladies. That'll work. Here's the first quality that I can tell you about leadership, the Jesus style. It's called vision. Every great leader that I've ever studied was driven by a vision, a compelling vision that kept them going. Before I talk to you about Jesus' vision, how about George Washington's compelling vision? Well, I'll tell you what it was. A new nation, independent of Great Britain's rule. That's what kept him going for the 8 years of the Revolutionary War. Abraham Lincoln's vision during his 5 tough years in the White House. One nation, not 2, or 5 or 7 small ones. How about Winston Churchill's vision? Well, his vision was a world free of Nazi oppression. Pretty simple. Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision, well, we all know that. A nation where we would not be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. How about Jesus' vision? Well, he talked about it in John chapter 14, the opening 6 verses. He's talking to his disciples, and he shares this vision. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place so that where I am, you may be also. What a vision that was. It just rocked the disciples. They were blown away. And they made it quite clear in one little statement, we don't get it, Jesus. We really don't get it. And Jesus said, you've been with me all this time and you don't grasp it, huh? And then maybe, I don't know, you could argue the most powerful verse in the New Testament. Jesus laid out his vision again. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father or gets into those mansions without me, without making a commitment to me, without becoming a Christ follower, without becoming a Christian. That probably leads to a very personal decision. Has that moment ever taken place in your life that you just said, Lord, I can't do it on my own. I've sinned many times, I've fallen short, and I really want to get that straightened out. I want my sins forgiven, and I want Jesus to enter into my life. And I want to become a Christian, and I want to be a Christ follower. If you've never really made that decision, this would be a good morning to do it. It's not very complicated. And just simply say, Lord, I'm inviting you in, and I want you to come in and take control of my life. And I want to follow you the rest of my days. And I want to make sure that I get in on that mansion up there that you've prepared for me, so that when I take my last breath, I don't have to worry. My family doesn't have to worry about where I'm going to spend eternity. I mean, that was Jesus' vision. And what a vision that he shares with us. I'm so glad he shared it with us so that we can be assured of an eternal destination. So every great leader always starts with the vision thing. Now here's the second quality of leadership I have discovered in analyzing Jesus. It's called communicating your vision. It is one thing to have a vision as a leader, but if we cannot communicate it effectively, let me tell you what's going to happen to that vision. Nothing. Nada. Nicked. Not one thing is going to happen to the vision if we can't communicate it well. So here's what I've learned. Leadership generally gravitates to the man or woman who can talk. That's generally who we elect to office. That's generally who gets the CEO post or the head coaching job or the high school principal job. Generally, that's who gets that post. Therefore, great leaders take very seriously this whole issue of communicating well. And I tell leaders across the country, really work at it. Take it seriously. Join Toastmasters. Join the National Speakers Association. Hire a speech coach if you're having lots of opportunities. Take the Dale Carnegie speaking course. It's really good. So there's Warren Buffett out in Omaha. And Warren Buffett has said, if you come into my office, you won't see any of my degrees that I've earned framed on my wall. He says there's just one. It was from the Dale Carnegie speaking course. He said the reason that's hanging there is that it changed my life and my career. And he said, so that's the only one I've got hanging. So how does Jesus check out as a communicator? Well, I wish we could hear his voice, I mean, in person. But here's the best substitute. This week, start with Matthew chapter 5, right at the beginning, Matthew 5. This is the first time Jesus really addressed a large group of people publicly. And he went on for quite a while. I mean, he laid out an entire new game plan for the world to follow. I mean, it was maybe the greatest speech ever given in the history of the world. Do you know what I hope? I hope somewhere out in the Middle East, there's a cassette tape of that event. And some little shepherd boy is going to come across it one day. And it's just going to be a big moment. I'm not sure, Scott, that happened or that they could have taped it back in that day. But oh my, wouldn't that be something to hear it? Now, in the meantime, the best we can do is to just keep reading in Matthew chapter 5 and imagining that we're hearing his voice, communicating once again his vision for a whole new way of living life on this earth. So they're the first two qualities that I've observed of Jesus as a leader that we can learn from. Here's the third one. People skills. People skills. Jesus had marvelous people skills as you read about him. And one of the people skills that I think is so vital with leadership is called being visible and available. That's what great leaders do, visible and available. For example, during the 8 years of the Revolutionary War, George Washington never left the troops. He never left the troops. He was with them the entire 8 years. And by the Civil War, we had photography. And where was Mr. Lincoln? Well, I'll tell you, after many of those battles, he was out on the edge of the battlefield, conferring with his generals, who generally had not generaled well, but there he was. No telling how many hospital units he visited, how many wounded and dying soldiers he spent time with, visible and available. Tom Peters, the business guru, calls it managing by walking around. That's his message to business leaders, managing by walking around. But long before Tom Peters came along, Jesus was doing that, out among the people. His public ministry was for 3 years. If my math is right, that's about 1,000 days. And every day had to be vitally important. Vitally important. No time to waste. He had a team around him. He had a team of handlers. His Franklin planner must have been packed. I mean, every minute of every day had to be scheduled, slotted, held to. It had to be. But inevitably, Jesus would foul it up because he was out moving among the people, and the people all had needs, and they all wanted things from him, and he always got engaged. Whether it was a lady around a well with all sorts of issues, whether it was a blind guy, who needed help and needed spittle with mud, put on his eyes. And then we had that little guy in the pool. You know about him. I mean, he just sat there, kind of immobilized. And a little tax collector up in a tree. We all sing about him, don't we? Wee little man. And he invites Jesus over to his house. And Jesus goes. I don't know how many days he spent there, but that had to mess the schedule up. But Jesus, you see, was so engaged with people, so interested in other people, wanted to help them. And he did it with a heart of love. And I've always been amazed about his interest and his love of people. Now, boy, that's a good lesson, isn't it? They know we are Christians by our love. That's a good little song. And every day, I think in the morning, we've got to get ourselves cranked up, don't we? That I'm going to treat everybody today that I encounter with love. Whether we're traveling and we're dealing with the flight attendants, or if we're checking into the hotel, the clerk behind the desk, the waitress at Denny's. And by the way, I'm not pitching Denny's, but they have really been pushing those fluffy pancakes. Have you noticed that? Billboards, and they're pretty good, aren't they? Yeah, I've popped in there a few times. Nevertheless, we treat those waitresses with love, just like Jesus would. Let's just call them people skills. And now we arrive at a fourth leadership skill I've noticed with Jesus, a leadership attribute. It's called character. Character counts in leadership. Character still counts in leadership. Or does it? We've been in quite a debate in this country over the years now. One argument says if the polls are good, if the economy is good, the character stuff is not all that important. The other argument says you can't lead without character. So what's the deal? Well, some years back, a pretty fair country leader that we all admired by the name of Schwarzkopf, General Schwarzkopf said this. He said, leadership consists of two vital components, he said, strategy and character. And he said, if you have to do without one, he said, do without the strategy. And then he went on to add, he said, I'm convinced that 95% of the breakdown of leadership in our country can be traced right back to a breakdown of character. So what are the character qualities that Jesus possessed that allowed him to be a great leader? Let me just suggest a few. One, it's called honesty, telling the truth in every situation. You never had to worry about Jesus shading the truth, did you? I mean, when he spoke, now you could take his word to the bank. May the same be said of us. Secondly, integrity. It comes from the root word integer, which means one, which would lead to a word like integrated. An integrated society is one society. So a leader of integrity has a consistency to their life. Their walk and talk match. They're not walking one way and talking completely the opposite, or vice versa. Jesus was a leader of integrity. There was a consistency to his life. And then there's a marvelous quality called humility, a humble spirit. Now keep in mind that Jesus was God. He was a human being and he was God. And so he's on this earth for 33 years as God. He was there when the world was created. He was there in the fiery furnace, with the boys back in the Old Testament. He made a few appearances in the Old Testament. But quite a resume. And now he's down here on earth among us. He could have been the most arrogant, puffed up, impossible human being ever to walk the face of the earth. He could have been. And you probably wouldn't blame him down here with us peons. But he wasn't. There was a beautiful, beautiful, humble spirit to the God-man that really inspired me. I've just finished writing a new book called Humility. Really, it's about the power of a humble spirit. I interviewed Ruth Graham on my radio show not long ago, Billy Graham's youngest daughter. And in the course of the interview, I asked about her famous father, and Ruth, in that wonderful North Carolina accent of hers, said, my daddy, she had me right there. She said, my daddy knows who he is, a flawed human being. And then she added, in Daddy's mind, he's still just a farm boy from Charlotte, North Carolina. I liked the statement. It really meant a lot to me to hear her say that about her famous father, arguably one of the 5 most recognized faces in the world over the last 100 years, but in his mind, just a farm boy from Charlotte. Here's the 5th quality I've noticed about Jesus as a leader. It is called competence. Competence. Jesus was good at what he did as a leader. And that begs a question for all of us. Are leaders born or are they made? I get asked that question a lot. Are leaders born or made? And my answer is always the same. Both. Every leader that I'm aware of, including Jesus, at one point was born. Every one of them. Including all of you. And at some point, they were all developed as well. So they were born, they were developed, but somewhere in here, something took place in their life, and the leader or the young person or the middle-aged person said, you know, it's my time to step up. This situation demands leadership. Nobody else is doing it, and if I don't step up and do it, it's not going to get done. I think that has happened in the life of every leader in the history of the world. There came that moment, and I'm not sure whether that moment's happened in your life. Maybe it's on the way, but some situation demands leadership, and you are saying, you know, I'm not really a leader. Well, you're about to become one. And you're going to learn about it, and you're going to step up, and you're going to grow like crazy, and you're going to gather people around you, and you're going to attack the situation, and you're going to become a leader. And you're going to be really challenged. And you're going to be greatly rewarded, and you're going to love doing it. And then you begin to grow as a leader. Now, here's what I've learned about great leaders. They're wonderful problem solvers. Colin Powell said, leadership is solving problems. And when soldiers stop bringing you their problems, you're through as a leader. When you are competent as a leader, you become a very good talent scout. You're always looking for talented people to join the cause. And then you, as a leader, have to figure out how to put the talent together as a team. Jesus did that, didn't he? I mean, he plucked those 12 men. I don't think any of them were superstars. But he pulled them together and figured out a way to knit them together over those 3 years. He built a team. And then after Jesus' crucifixion and his resurrection, he basically said to these 11, plus the new addition, take the message and run with it. Get it out there. Well, I think we've got about 3 billion Christians on earth. I'd say those 11, 12 guys did a wonderful job, didn't they? I mean, it's amazing what they did. Jesus picked them, saw something there, invested in them, put the team together, and the team did a marvelous job, and they've passed the baton down through the generations, and now we're running with the baton, and it's our job to get it into the hands of the next generation, and all because Jesus knew how to pick talent and put a team together. And then there's one other thing I want to mention here, and it's called learning. I think great leaders are lifelong learners. And when they stop learning, the leadership process begins to shrivel up. Lifelong learners. And you know the best way to be a lifelong learner? Be a lifelong reader of good books. President Harry Truman, who never went to college, but maybe was our brightest, sharpest president, because he was an absolutely avid reader. And Harry Truman once said, not all readers will be leaders, but all leaders must be readers. That's why I lugged this morning cases of some of the books I've written. And they're in the back there. And we're going to have a book signing party that Scott permitted. He said, bring the books, we'll set up a table and let our parishioners go check them out and see what they like. And so you're not going to have to go to Barnes & Noble or Books A Million, for weeks. Do your Christmas shopping right here. That's kind of a subtle little message. Here's the sixth thing I've learned about Jesus as a leader. It's called boldness. Boldness, not baldness, sir. Boldness. And you know what bold leaders do? They make decisions. And they don't look back. And they don't second guess themselves. And they don't play the woulda, coulda, shoulda game. If only. If we could just redo this. There are really no redos in leadership, no mulligans. And great leaders make decisions, they move on, they don't look back. They make the next decision. If the last one wasn't right, they make the next one to rectify it. And Jesus led with boldness. He was not afraid. He was dealing with a lot of strong people, a lot of tough, hard-nosed people. But he didn't back down. He went right after them in many cases. Many times in the scriptures, I'm saying, Jesus, why don't you just cool it here? Maybe you should just back off a little bit, but he never did. Because he had strong feelings, strong opinions, and he was a bold leader. George W. Bush, in the White House, he used to say, I'm the decider. I can still hear his voice. I'm the decider. I decide what to do. And every organization needs a decider. And without one, nothing ever gets done. And then there's a final piece here. There's a seventh ingredient about Jesus as a leader. It's simply called a serving heart. A serving heart. And so we know that story, don't we? Late in his life, late in his time on earth, you know, the crucifixion is there, and I mean his time on earth is over, just about. And the last thing he does is wash his disciples' feet. Boy, that was a nasty job. That was for servants. I mean, they didn't have shoes, really. They were sandals. The roads weren't paved. I mean, they were dirty and dusty, and so you had to have a foot washer and a basin and cloth. And Jesus insisted on washing the feet of his disciples. Whew. Had to be an ugly assignment. The disciples were upset because they didn't like this thing going on, but he insisted. I think it was a demonstration, really, that we are here on this earth as Christian leaders to serve other people. And that's our mission. And the mindset of a serving-hearted leader is simply this. It's not about me. It's about you. It's not about building my resume. It's about building yours. It's not about advancing my career goals. It's about advancing yours. It's not about my personal success. It's about the success of this church or this company or this organization that I'm leading. That's how Jesus thought. That's how serving-hearted leaders, followers of Christ, think as they lead. Kind of a paradox, isn't it? Now, the world doesn't really lead that way, but Christian leaders do, and Jesus set the example for us. So let me summarize what we've covered here this morning. 7 things one must do to be a leader, right and true. Have vision that is strong and clear. Communicate so they can hear. Have people skills based in love. And character that's far above. The competence to solve and teach. And boldness that has fearless reach. A serving heart that stands close by to help, assist, and edify. Lead on, my friends, lead on.